What does this bag and this applique have in common? They both use my new fabric collection, Colorburst. Let me tell you all about it. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café. Tuesday, I shared my brand new fabric collection with you, Colorburst. It is so versatile and fun. There's so many different things that you can do with it. And as you can see, the colors are just bursting off the surface of the fabric. Behind me, we have the arcade pattern. You can see it works beautifully with 3-yard quilts, but it also works great for other projects. So today, I'm gonna share some with you. So one of the projects I would like to share with you today is the applique that is on my shirt. Now, the Colorburst collection is so versatile, you can see how well it worked on this. Now, we're gonna step through how to do this applique today. And before we get started, I want to share the supplies list with you. So if you'd like to hit the pause button for just a moment and jot them down, please do so. Now, we also have a free goodie on our website, fabriccafe.com, under that free goodies tab that has the complete pattern. Now, of course, down here is our materials list. And then it also has all of the pattern pieces marked very clearly, as well as the layout and the step-by-step instructions. Now remember, this is a free goodie, so it's free to you on fabriccafe.com. So we've gathered all of our supplies and we're ready to get started. So I have my pattern downloaded here, and I have my fusible web, my paperback fusible web, a pencil and some scissors. So the first thing I'm gonna do is start tracing these patterns onto the fusible web. Now, something to note when you do that, there are two sides to the fusible web. One is a rough side and one is a paper side. We want to draw on the paper side. Now, what's really great about fusible web like this is that you can see through it, so it makes it super simple. So I'm just gonna draw one of my vines here. Don't worry too much about how it's placed on the fusible. You're gonna be cutting these all apart anyway. I'm just gonna use a pencil and I'm gonna very roughly, I don't even worry too much whether or not it's super precise. I just get that trace line and I just continue to go here. Now, I really enjoy doing applique. I know it's one of the first things that I learned in quilting is doing machine applique, and it was just so much fun. So it's one of my first loves in quilting. Okay, this is going along really great. We're getting this all traced. So there's one line. Now, if you notice on the pattern here, it tells you you're gonna need 2 of these, and then you're gonna cut one and the fabric that you're cutting it from. So I'm gonna look over here, and here's another one that's also cut from teal. I'm gonna go ahead and trace that so that I can show you. And we're just gonna do one of these for now, but actually, you need 3 of those, and you will go through and trace each pattern piece, the number that it is stated on the pattern. So then we're gonna cut these apart. Now at this time, you don't wanna cut on the line directly. We wanna leave some space around, and then you will fuse it to your fabric. So I'm just gonna cut these apart like this. We'll save this for later. And you can see we have our 2 vines there. I'm gonna cut these apart like this. So what I've done here is I've traced them and cut them out, leaving a margin around the traced lines. Okay, we've got our iron set up, so we're gonna fuse these traced pieces onto our fabric. So the first thing we're gonna do is bring over the appropriate fabric, and of course your pattern states exactly what you are gonna be using. Now we're gonna be fusing on the wrong side. So you can see here our turquoise, here's the right side, here's our wrong side. We have our vines that we've traced here, and I'm going to iron them onto the wrong side. Now remember, the rough side is your glue, so you want that down. Don't have that facing up. So I have my iron set on cotton setting. I do not have steam on. So we just press that down and let that fuse. And then we can just kind of arrange this over in this spot and do the same thing. Let's get this one fused down. Now, if I was doing this to finish the project and not just showing you, I would probably do all my teal pieces at once so that it's really simple and it's all ironed on the teal. But for this purpose, I want to show you how to do it. So we've got these 2 fused down. You can see they're fused down nice and solid. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut out a little bit around it very roughly. so that I have a smaller piece of fabric to work with. Now I'm going to save this for another applique. All right, we're going to start out with this little one, and we're just going to cut out around the trace line. Now this is where we're cutting on the line. And as you can see, I'm just very carefully kind of cutting around where I've traced. And I have to say that if you have a sharp pair of scissors with a point on it like this that are a little bit smaller, they're easier to use to cut out your applique. And I'm just very carefully going around, round, and just rotating the fabric, and that makes it super simple to cut out. And you know, I have to say, I do not get just super precise on this. This is nature, you know, nature always is unique in every single little piece. So that's how I think about it. So there's our little piece, our little vine, and then we can just cut out our big vine. I'm just gonna do a little bit, and then I'm gonna show you how to cut out that little loop-de-loo on your applique. Because you see this little spot right here is a hole that's gonna need to be cut out. How I do that after I cut out all the way around the edge, I would just fold this back like this and do a tiny little snip with my sharp scissors, my end. And then I can put my tip in there and clip, 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 and go all the way around. Let's see, did I get all the way through? You just kind of have to start a hole kind of in your center there and then just cut around all the way around. For some reason, the tips of my scissors are not super sharp, so let that be a lesson. Use really sharp scissors. And that's going to give you the little spot in that middle of that loop that you're going to be able to use and just applique around. Now I'm going to continue cutting this out all the way around so that I can have my vine for my applique as we start sewing. Okay, so we have all of our applique pieces cut out, we have our background square here, and we're ready to start applying our layers onto our background. Now I'm just using a square of fabric here. You could use this square of fabric for a pillow cover, you could use it for a quilt block itself, or so many other things. But I'm gonna use it just so that I can show you how to do this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is to find the center of this square of fabric. To do that is very simple. I'm going to fold it and then fold it in half and then fold it in half again, and I'm just going to kind of finger press it there. That is my center. And as you can see, it shows up very nicely. Now we've downloaded our pattern and it has the placement for our applique on it, and that is here. So what I'm going to do is just slide this up underneath. And I can iron on this. It doesn't bother it at all if you iron this paper. Okay, so you can see this placement here, which is great. Now, whenever I did my shirt, let me give you a tip. I actually printed this out, cut out around the outside edge, and pinned it to the place that I wanted the applique to be. Then I actually put the shirt on to make sure that the placement was as flattering as possible. And then I just took it to the iron, left the paper in, and then fused directly on the shirt with the paper there. So it made it perfect. So we're just using our square here. So you can see that we are pretty centered, because I think that's important when you're working with your applique. You want it in the middle of your space. Then we're going to start with one of our larger vines. Now before you iron this on, one of the things that you need to do is peel this paper off of the back. And one of the tricks that I have learned to do that is I just fold it in half like this. Just take an end of it or a corner or an edge and just roll it between my index finger and my thumb, and that will separate it. And then you can just pull that right off. And when you pull that off, you can see that there's a shiny coat on the back of the fabric. That's our glue. That was that rough spot, that rough stuff that was on there. Now I'm just going to place this right down on top of where the pattern says to place it. So there it is. Now remember, it's nature. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be beautiful. So I've got it in place. I'm going to grab my iron and I'm going to press down and just hold it for a moment. And then voila, it's glued to the fabric. Now we've got all of our vines that we can continue to put down. And that's all we're going to do. I need to do my trick, just like I showed you. Roll it and it'll just separate perfectly. And then place it here. Okay, so the first step on my applique is to put the vines and the leaves down. I always kind of strategize how I'm gonna do this because I don't like to change my thread color that much. It's kind of the lazy quilter's way of doing things, I guess. But I put all of my vines down and my leaves, I appliqued those so that I can do all of my blue and green. And then we'll come back and do our flowers. So let me iron this one particular vine down and then I'm gonna show you what I mean by that. Okay, now I'm gonna just slide this to the side. And here is a sample where I have my vines all ironed onto my background. I have actually gone through and done the blanket stitch around the edges, and I'm gonna show you how to do that in just a moment. And then our leaves. Now I would probably also go do our leaves at this time, but I'm gonna show you how to stack your flowers and get them here. Okay, so let's look at a flower. The way that these are made is in layers. So let's look at the pattern first. I have my large flower and we're tracing on the dark black line and then we'll cut it out and iron it onto the indicated fabric, just like that. Now we also have this center part. You can see that that's that onto another print of fabric. So we'll get all those prepared and cut out. We're gonna start with the middle one first. I'm gonna do my little trick, index finger and thumb, roll it so it separates. That works every time. And then I'm gonna position this right on the center of the flower. Now notice, the paper is still on the back side of the big piece there. So I can actually take this, iron this down because the paper's still there. All right, see how that fused that down and it didn't stick to the background. So perfect. Now, after you do that with all of them, then we can come and take the back paper off and iron it here. Now, I also want to mention something that I tend to do. Paper's off. Very simple. Something that I do is I kind of think about what I need to do first, second, and third kind of a thing as far as thread color because I don't like to change my thread that much. So I go through, and that's the reason why I did all the blue. Now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna fuse this down and I'll go around this and I'll go around the middle edge. That way I can go in these little points here and just keep going without cutting my thread or tying off. Then after I do all the stitching around this, I'm gonna come in here with the center, iron that on, and then go around that. It just makes it so I'm not starting and stopping and have all the threads and I don't have to break my thread so often. It's so much simpler to just think about it. And of course the pattern steps you through all the layers that we'll do so that it makes it easiest for you. All right, let's go ahead and start pressing these on and show you how to get them down with the sewing machine. Okay, so now let's talk about the applique stitch that we're gonna use. I prefer to use a blanket stitch. And whenever I'm using a blanket stitch, I make sure, I do a little test and make sure that I'm using the blanket stitch and not one of the other utility stitches. So a blanket stitch takes one stitch forward, takes one stitch to the side, one stitch back, and one stitch forward. It never goes backwards like some of the utility stitches that look like blanket stitches, but the blanket stitch does not do that. So I've set my machine up for the blanket stitch. I have an open-toed foot on my machine, which just means that it's completely open in front of the needle. And then I have loaded my machine with a matching color of thread. Now on our applique here, we're gonna have several different colors that we're using. And remember I was talking about we're gonna put them down in layers. The reason why I do that is it keeps me from changing my color too much. So I've put my vines down and it used blue thread and I appliqued all the edges. Now we have our flowers down and I've changed my thread color to the orange to match the outer edge of this. Okay, so we're threaded and it's also in my bobbin, which is pretty important when you're doing applique so that you don't see it. Then I'm gonna take my thread ends here and I'm gonna pull them long. I like to start with these long threads because it gives me plenty to tie off with. I don't like them to be too short. I want to have plenty to thread. Then I'm going to position my needle on one of the inner sections of the outside flower here. So I start like in the inverted point there. And I'm going to work with my needle in the down position. So I'm going to just check that. I'm going to tap this so it goes down. I'm going to tap my presser foot. All right, and here we go. So my needle is going to land right on the edge of the fabric, of the cutout fabric. I want to ride right along that edge. So we're going to go, we have one stitch forward, landing right on the edge. And then I'm going to just keep tapping it so it takes that little bite and then it goes forward again. Now, I'm going to go slow here for just a moment, and then we're going to get a little faster into our curve. When we get to the curve, we're going to stop on the outside, not on the bite. So we're on the outside edge. We're going to shift our fabric just a little bit, take a stitch, and then we're going to make sure that it's positioned so the bite is like at a 90-degree angle from the edge of the applique. For me, that's pretty important, and it keeps you from a stitch that has a weird angle on it whenever it's catching that edge. The other thing to remember is always pivot on the outside. Never pivot whenever it's taking the bite. If you do that, what's going to happen is you'll end up with a V on the bite part instead of that straight, neat little stitch. So I'm just going to keep sewing so that you can see how I adjust and keep pivoting. Of course, once again, my needle is in the down position, and I just keep going. And then whenever I get to a little straight part, it makes it a whole lot faster. You can kind of move along here. All right, I'm on that inner point. We're going to turn, and here we go. Okay, this is super cool. I can just sit here and sew just a little bit, and then I'm going to stop and show you how to tie off. So I'm going to stop at a inner point here. I'm going to tap my foot pedal so my needle comes out of the fabric. I'm going to pull this nice and long so I have a nice long tail, and then that way I have these long tails that I can thread in and tie off. Okay, you would of course continue to go all the way around the edge of your fabric. I'm going to flip this over to this side. I like to use a larger eye needle for this. It's even something like a cross stitch needle or something with a bigger eye. And I'm going to just kind of pull the bottom thread, the bobbin thread. It'll pull the top thread through. Grab these threads. Then I'm just going to tie a couple of overhead knots. I'm going to take both threads and thread them into my needle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and run it underneath those little stitches, those bites from those stitches. I like to do 4, 5, 6, just like so. Then I'm going to pull this. And you can see how neatly it ran it up underneath there. And then I can trim that long end. Now I will also go back and do this one too. And as you can see, all these other ones that I've tied off, it tucks them in nice and neat, and it makes it almost as pretty on the back side as it does on the front. Now I wanted to share another project using the Colorburst collection, and we've made this tote bag out of it. I think this is absolutely adorable. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, this is gonna be great, and then you get it done and you're like, wow, it's amazing. But I love how the big focal fabric here is just really shining with the base of the orange. And look how cool this bag is. When you open it up, it has all kinds of pockets and zippers, and it's just awesome. And what's really great about it is whenever you grab the handles, it just automatically closes. Now this is a perfect project for using the Colorburst collection, and we do have the pattern. This is the Pucker Up Project Tote. This is on our website, fabriccafe.com. All you have to do is to go to the sewing projects section, and it's under the pattern tab. So this is available for you, and a great project for the Colorburst line. As you can see, Colorburst is such a versatile line that works in so many different projects, and it comes in many different ways. So at fabriccafe.com, you can purchase Colorburst by the yard off of our fabric tab and by the yard. Just 10 different prints all by the yard. We also have a fat quarter kit that is available. We have a 10-yard bundle. Now the 10-yard bundle has 1 yard of every print in the collection. So just think of the possibilities with that and how many wonderful things. We also have our bag pattern that is on our pattern tab under sewing projects. And of course, don't forget all of the free goodies under the free goodies tab. So there's so many possibilities. Now, of course, the staple 3-yard quilts. As you can see behind me, the quilt, so many different quilt kits available out of the Colorburst collection. So what are you waiting for? Get on over there and get you some Colorburst and add a little color to your quilting studio. It's Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe.